So good morning, everybody watching online and everybody with us in our makeshift Association of Vermont Credit Union studio here. Thank you for joining us for our first broadcast on Vermont Credit Unions Live, which is a Ustream channel brought to you by the Association of Vermont Credit Unions. And we've promoted today's session, and sessions we'll be doing in the future to Vermont credit unions and cooperatives around the state of Vermont. And so we're excited to be doing this presentation today as our pilot to see how this goes. So excuse any rough edges we might have. I want to thank North Country Federal Credit Union for connecting us with the idea for this session today and our speaker that's going to be addressing you shortly. And John Cody here at the Association of Vermont Credit Unions for his work in pulling this all together, organizing it, and helping out with the technology setup that we've got here. I'm Joe Bergeron, President of the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, and again, we're broadcasting from our conference room in the Association of Vermont Credit Unions on Water Tower Hill in Colchester, Vermont, and thank you for joining us. Our subject today, our first presentation, is Public Officer Information Training, and there's certainly been our more than fair share in Vermont of emergency situations due to natural disaster and otherwise over the past couple years, and so we're fortunate to have with us here today the Public Information Officer for the Vermont Emergency Management Service, and that's Mark Bosma. Mark manages the distribution of daily and emergency public information, including crisis communications. He also publishes the Emergency Management's monthly newsletter and maintains their website, handles information requests from the public, media relations, and does presentations like this throughout the state of Vermont. He's been with Vermont's Emergency Management since 2006 after serving as Public Information Officer for the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, and in a prior life was a news reporter and producer at WCX-TV for more than 10 years. So we're real fortunate to have Mark with us. One housekeeping thing before we turn things over to Mark. If you're using Ustream for the first time, you'll see on, I think it's the right-hand side of your screen, a chat box in which you should feel free to type in any questions at any time. And there are a couple of us here who will be monitoring those, and we'll pass those on to Mark as you submit them. So again, feel free to send us a message, a question, a comment, anything you want at any time. And now we'll turn things over to Mark. So thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone who's here and tuning in. This is kind of a new way of me doing this. Usually I go to the firehouse and with my PowerPoint projector, and we put up a white sheet or find a white wall and just project it there. We never streamed this before or had this type of detail. Like you said, I'm the Public Information Officer at Vermont Emergency Management, and I have extensive experience at Channel 3 as well for 10 years, and so it's sort of offered me an experience on both sides of this that gives me a perspective and an understanding of how both public information and the media works. I threw in a few extra slides just to give the basics of emergency management and how we work. I promise it's only two, so we won't drone on about this. But our role at emergency management is to respond, mitigate, prepare, and recover from disasters. Most of it pre-Irene, 95% of our time was preparing for the next one, and post-Irene, of course, we had the big response, and now we're still in recovery and will be for some time, and right now we're working on a lot of mitigation as well. That's helping communities mitigate potential disasters like culverts and getting bigger culverts and buying out properties and stuff like that, so that the damage in the future won't be quite as bad. We work under the incident command system. When there's an incident, we have one person who is the incident commander. I'll reference the incident command system a couple of times. So just to give you a basic idea, I work under the incident commander in the command staff. One person running it. This is universal in any incident, and we also have different sections that help run the incident, and we have what's called state support functions, which are representatives from say health and public service and different state agencies that help to run things and answer questions. Finally, this is how disaster response works and where the state and the federal government becomes involved. A disaster occurs, and 99 times out of 100, there's a local response, and that's the end of it. There's a fire, there's a car accident, the local fire department or emergency and other emergency responders respond, and that's the end of the incident. But if it's a larger incident, as we go through this arrow with stars on it, it gets bigger and bigger, and then the state becomes involved, and then eventually, if we get a presidential declaration, then the federal government becomes involved with money and disaster recovery funds. Okay, so the emergency public information and the role of the PIO. Basically, like I said, we operate within the incident command system, and basically what I do, and I'm sure what many of you do, is collect and verify and disseminate information for the target audiences through effective communication, and whether that's passing on the risk of floods or what to do during a flood, or during a flood, how to evacuate, where to evacuate to. That's largely my role. And I was once told that I sometimes go fast when I get on a roll, so if anyone wants to either enter the chat room or here tell me I'm going too fast, please do. I just sort of I get on a roll and just get so excited about it that I roll right along. The underlying principle under which we operate, and I think most public relations professionals operate, is that the media is an integral part of emergency response. And so they're our partners. They're not our enemy. They're not anything else. They're our partners because they're a direct conduit to our 600,000 constituents, which is the people of Vermont before, during, and after a disaster. And so if we ever have bad experiences, and I think that goes for all public relations people, as you all well know, they need to be left in the past, because especially since the Vermont media is such a small community, it doesn't bode well to have grudges or a bad relationship with anyone. Some of the terms that we'll use: public information is just the basic day-to-day. Public relations people do it. I use it. It's just information that's collected and sent out. Like I said, whether it's warning of potential disasters and what to do in a snowstorm or during a flood, and that's disseminated to the public. Emergency public information, obviously, it's just that.
An ad.
This presentation brought to you by. Emergency public information is developed during an incident, and obviously it's the protective actions or whatever we want to recommend the people do to save lives and protect their property. The day-to-day stuff, we're trying to call people to action and educate them and change behaviors and attitudes. Over the last, at least in my lifetime, I've seen some very successful ones with smoke detectors and seat belts. So those have been successful, and over the last year, 15 months since August 28th, we've certainly had a lot of people who have done a lot more planning toward the potential for floods and the like. And we're also, and I'm sure you are too, trying to create a positive impression of our organization. We're not trying to drum up business or anything like that. We just want to. It helps build confidence in your organization if people view your organization in a positive light. So we're always trying to show that we know what we're doing. And emergency public information and emergency response in general, our three goals are first and foremost to save lives, then reduce injury and protect property and the environment. And again, it also may instill confidence in our ability to manage an incident. We need to show that we know what we're doing, so that we get buy-in from the public the next time. The external target audience is ultimately the public. All arrows should point to the public here, but we go through the media, and I should add social media now to this slide, as there's been such an explosion in the use of social media, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Qualities of a good PIO and a good public relations person, anyone who does this sort of thing. Credibility and trust is critical when dealing not only with the media but with the public. You have to think strategically how certain information is going to play out, and whether it's going to be effective or not. Proactive and knowledgeable, obviously, and assertive. You need to be able to butt in and get your voice heard above, and not just answer questions from the media. Flexibility is important. Ability to perform under pressure, and almost it's not the most important thing, but it's of critical importance that you be accessible, and that we be accessible, because if the media can't find you to answer questions, they'll ask someone else, and they may not answer the question the way you would answer the question, or you would want anyone to answer the question. We need to know the demographics of the community, the government structure. Obviously, the key players aren't always the firefighters and the police. Sometimes the key players will be someone in the community who just everybody listens to. Generally speaking, and I attended a conference at Harvard a couple of years ago, and studies show that the most trusted person in any community is the fire chief, especially in small communities. So the fire chief is the person that most people look to for guidance and information. And again, at least in emergency response, we need to know the basic emergency concepts, incident command system, which I showed you a couple minutes ago, and something called the National Incident Management System, which is the system that, obviously, it's the national management system, which means that it starts at the local level, it goes to the state level, and then it goes to the federal level, and that's the order in which response works. Excuse me a moment. And like I said, your credibility is the most important thing, not only in emergency public information, but in public relations, or any time you're dealing with the media or the public. And what we need to do is just demonstrate that we know what we're talking about, being honest about things, and obviously being accessible and responsive. It's much appreciated, and if you're seen as a reliable source of information that responds to people quickly, there's a greater likelihood that you'll get the call rather than someone else. So it's always important to be accessible, and for better or for worse, the media, they all have my home phone number now and my cell phone, and so I can't escape it unless I go somewhere. I don't know if anyone knows the town of Athens. It's a tiny town in southern Vermont. We have a house down there, and sometimes I go down there, there's no cell service, there's no internet. That's the only way to get away from it. Provide access to newsmakers if you want to build your relationship with the media. And that's the newsmakers in emergency response. That's the chief, that's the director, that's the commissioner. And for the credit unions, it's the executives. There's a little, as a member of the media, I didn't like talking to the PR person or the spokesperson, because that's someone who's not, and I say this as a public information person, I'm not nearly as important as our director, and it's not nearly as impressive talking to me as it would be talking to the commissioner or the director. Um, respect deadlines. Deadlines are all over the place now. There are newscasts at what, from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then at noon, and then they start up again at 5:30, 6, 7, 10, 10:30, 11. They're all over the place. So if you ever do work with the media, it's always a good thing. One of your first questions should be, what's your deadline? After they get the questions. That way, at least if you can't meet that deadline, at least you can give them some idea that you're not going to meet the deadline, or it'll allow you to get something to them by their deadline. That way you know when they need something. And again, that's much appreciated, and will enhance your credibility. We do a lot of our communicating through written communications, press releases, and our website and social media. And so, whenever you write anything, obviously it has to be well organized and easy to follow. It uses clear and concise language. It doesn't have to be. You're not writing a novel, especially in my line of work. I'm just presenting the information of an incident, and so it can be short sentences, short paragraphs, but it still has to use correct grammar and punctuation, and the spelling has to be correct, or else there's not. I've seen press releases with spelling errors which are obvious spelling errors, and it just looks so bad, and the person writing it looks so bad that it's tough to take that person seriously. And of course, you want to convey your key messages, because this is your first shot at it. This is your first shot to get your message out there and tell the media, and therefore the public, what you want to tell them. On camera, I used to, and this was something that was developed by FEMA initially, and I kind of stripped it down. I made it local. And one of the first bullet here used to say speak in sound bites, but I know as a member of the media, I hated it when people said, I'll give you a sound bite. I've got a sound bite up here, because it's just not, it doesn't feel like it's natural. But you do have to develop a succinct answer to questions. If you have to get your main points down in 15 to 20 seconds, because if you don't get it down to 15 to 20 seconds, then the person editing the story will get it down to 15 to 20 seconds, and it may not be what you want. It may not be your main point. You're allowing them to decide what the main point of the story is by not being succinct, by giving them that license to edit down your comments. Make eye contact when you're doing the interview, and don't use a lot of distracting gestures. If you do this, if you're so excited that you're talking like this, this is all people are gonna. This is for you out there. This is all people are gonna remember, and this is all people are gonna hear. So unless you're speaking in sign language, try to keep your hands quiet. Right now, if you are preparing for emergency response, assess your readiness. Make sure you know the organization and the structure. Understand the big picture of how it all works, and how your response works, and you do have a response here. This isn't just for emergency responders. Establish relationships with other PIOs in the media, and as today shows, you've done that, and you're doing that, and that's great. Conduct regular media outreach, even if you get to know one reporter, and every once in a while you give them a call, and you may have a news tip for them. It doesn't have to be about your organization. It can be something in your town. It just establishes you as a credible person, and someone who will work with them, if that makes sense. And of course, plan, train, and exercise, and I certainly appreciate you having me here to do this training. like I said, most of our communications are in writing. Like I said earlier, it supports a proactive approach. Not only does it get your message out there, which benefits you, it shows the media that you're staying ahead of it, and you're not waiting for them to ask you, and therefore it establishes your credibility and it tells your story your way. They have something called you often see these brief stories, especially on websites now, media websites, where sometimes they'll largely, at least with us, they'll largely reprint our press release on their website, or sometimes I've seen it in print. Sometimes I've heard them read on TV or radio. So it helps tell your story your way. And like I said, it may be used verbatim, and oftentimes it will educate the news media. They don't know why we do some of the things we do, and so if a well put together press release can educate them on what we do and why we're doing something, especially during a specific event. It organizes your thoughts. You're not speaking off the cuff. You're not reacting to questions that you may not know the answers to. It helps you organize your thoughts, and the media may turn around in 2 months and use your press release for another issue, another purpose. So all those help us. I mean, it all helps us to get our message out and get our message out our way. Some of the products I generally use the first two, news releases and web products. We have a lot of web products and news releases. Oftentimes before an incident, always during an incident that's large. I'll put out news releases. Sometimes you'll see the governor puts out a statement. Our congressional delegation may put out a statement when something happens, and they just want people to know what they have to say about it. The fact sheets are something that we will develop in-house, just so people know, that who we work with know what's going on. Media advisories, those announce something like a press conference or something like that. And talking points are also very important, and we do develop those internally, because it keeps people, especially the leadership, on task and on message, and tells them what we're trying to get across. And so when they do an interview, they'll say the correct things. Hopefully, that doesn't always happen, but that's the hope. Newsletter articles. If you go to our website at vem.vermont.gov, we have a newsletter that we put out monthly, and it's virtual only. We don't print it, and there are always brochures, flyers, and other things that you can hand out to the media if you need extra educational materials.
So, Mark, I've got a question for you.
Sure thing.
And that's that in the prior slide before this one, you referenced that, or actually quite a ways back, you referenced that reporters, want to speak to, who they perceive to be the number one person, not necessarily the public information officer or communications person. But then in the slide before this one, you're referencing, extensive use of press releases too.
Right.
And I think there's probably a differentiation between a press release announcing, something new we're doing, versus a press release for like disaster recovery, emergency situation like you're talking about. So in the instance of some kind of emergency development or situation, when you send out a press release, are you in hopes that causes the reporter to want to speak to your chief operating officer, number one person or whatnot, or are you putting everything you've got in that press release and saying, we really don't have anything more to say, it's all there?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it depends. Before the fact, what we want to do is we want to create interest with the public and get the message out that people need to prepare. So in that case, we want follow-up. We like it when we get a follow-up call that we want to come in and talk to Joe Flynn, who's our director, or someone like that. During an incident, you're actually trying to cut down on the phone calls, especially when it's a very busy incident. You're trying to answer all of the questions You certainly have the facts in front of you. Before an incident, you're dealing with a lot of what ifs, but you have the facts in front of you. It doesn't stop the media inquiries, and for good reason. They want to know what's going on. But the more detail you get into those press releases, the more likelihood you won't get as many calls. So it depends on when it is and what it is. So sometimes we're hoping for it. Sometimes we hate to hear the phone ring. During Irene, the phone never stopped ringing, and so that's just a fact of life, and so it can become a distraction, and you're trying to cut down on those distractions.
Great, thank you.
All right. Of course, the written product should suit your purposes and speak to the target audience. Our target audience in emergency I should say we've recently merged with the Division of Homeland Security, so we're now the Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Nothing has really changed, but we're under one umbrella now. So I'm still trying to use the new title when I speak about us. But our constituency is the 600,000 people who live in Vermont, and our visitors. And your written product should speak to them and also suit the complexity of the subject. And sometimes it's multiple products, and certainly we do use multiple products during an incident. I have one person who is dedicated solely to social media, writing messages on social media and monitoring what people are saying about us, because believe it or not, sometimes on the web there's incorrect information, and so we try to correct that as quickly as we can. I learned this in journalism school 20-some years ago. Elements of a newsworthy story: timeliness, proximity, conflict, impact, prominence, uniqueness, and human interest. Basically, if there's an impact on people around you, or if people would be interested in it because it's either strange or there's some impact that's either known or unknown to them, then that's certainly newsworthy and worthy of a press release. And oftentimes we'll see that the prominence of a subject will drive whether it's a news story. If it's getting a little far in the rearview mirror, but I've always cited the time the actor Matt Dillon was pulled over in Vermont for speeding. That made the news, whereas it may not have otherwise if it was just me. So sometimes the prominence of a subject drives a news story, and human interest stories are good to again enhance your credibility and enhance the view of your organization, because we all know if you're doing some sort of food drive or fundraiser, that could make it into the news, and certainly your name's on it. So it makes you look good, and it shows that you are interested in being a member of the community, and that always is a good thing. Of course, news releases should be factual and accurate. Like I said, clear and concise and easy to understand language, especially when I write them. Just short sentences, only a couple sentences in a paragraph, written in the third person. If you do have some facts that come from someone else, attribute it to them, not only to give them credit for it, for the information, but if it's wrong, you've also given them credit for the information that's incorrect, and it doesn't come back to you. And we run into this a lot in emergency response, jargon and acronyms. FEMA puts out a book of acronyms. It's a book about this big, but it has like 300 pages of acronyms, single spaced. There are just so many that are used, and most people, I know like 5 of them in that book. The other ones I have to look up when I see them. But the average person won't know what a lot of your acronyms do. If you're going to be saying something like New England Federal Credit Union several times, first reference full name with maybe the acronym in parentheses, and then you can go on from there and use the acronym in the interest of space. So when you're writing it, if you have time, a lot of time in emergency response, you don't have a ton of time to get information together, but organize your facts. Open with a strong lead, and the strong lead is usually there's a flood. Not this simplistic, but something about there's a flood in Colchester in this spot. We're evacuating. That's your opening sentence, because it not only piques people's interest, but it tells people right away what's going on, and that's the most important information. And then answer as many questions as you can with who, what, when, where, why, and how. You often can't answer these questions, not all of them anyway. Why and who in police work is often, that's why you're in police work, you're trying to figure out who and why someone did something. But as many of these questions as you can answer in the press release, the better off you'll be and the better off your audience will be. Again, something from journalism school. Reporters live by this, and I do too. Your most important facts should go right up top, because from a practical standpoint, oftentimes someone will pick up a press release, read the first paragraph, and either toss it or keep reading, and so you want to get the most important facts right up top, so that it either grabs their interest or, again, it tells them what the important information is. Then supporting facts and less important facts, and then in the background maybe some history of your organization and things like that at the bottom. They may not get to it, but it's always a good forum. News releases, and this is emergency response, but it may be a good idea for other PR people. I'm not sure. I haven't worked in the field, the commercial field, but normally when we do them, they're one page and single spaced, just because we know that no one's going to sit there and read a 3-page press release during a disaster. On your organizational letterhead, so people know it's from you and they get to recognize it. We don't have a letterhead at Emergency Management Homeland Security for some reason, so I just have a consistent box that I put on top. So people, after 6 years, people have come to recognize that box, and so they know it's from us, and hopefully that means they feel they need to read it.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
A lot of the press releases go in through email now, I've noticed. So
It can get crazy if your email, if it is a little, it's not consistent through all email formats, I know that, but at least it's consistent in the way people see it.
So should I put my logo on it, or should I scan it and send it?
Well,
or
you know, I have attempted to send press releases. I thought, oh, just turn it into a PDF and send the press release.
mm-hmm.
But there are actually news organizations out there that still reject any email with an attachment on it, and so they bounce back. And so I cut and paste it, and if it looks different to someone, if say the box doesn't translate as well to a different email format, at least it's still consistent. They know what it looks like. It's like, oh, the dates here, the names here, it's all over the place. Oh, that must be their heading, even though it's not pretty, but it is what it is, and I'm sure someone smarter than me can figure out a way of doing that so that it's always consistent. But if you can figure out a way of getting around that, please let me know.
I've just been putting the logo up.
Yeah,
up at
no,
the top.
the logo is great. Getting your logo up there, it's just that visual that people know that it's from you.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good thing to have. A long answer to a short. But
So I don't know if you're going to touch on this, Mark, or not. So if you are, then address it later. But your discussion about logos on press releases and things like that made me wonder about people that use social media as a means to trigger, an interest. Like, using their Twitter feed to connect people to or whoever they're trying to get to the information that they're putting out, whether it's on their website or something, or using their Facebook page as a means of announcement or something like that. Is that becoming more common?
I am going to address that in just a couple minutes. But yeah, that's important. Every press release should have contact information, and it needs to be a contact number that someone is actually going to answer. Normally I'm doing this to firefighters or police, and I tell them, don't just put the fire station number down because no one's there after hours because it's volunteer. Make sure that the contact information comes from someone and goes to someone who's actually going to answer a phone, or at least someone who can forward a call to you. The date and time is important because if you fax something, it could sit on the fax machine for a little while, and no one knows when it comes in, especially when I do something about a flood. Someone 3 days later sees that there's a flood happening right now, and it happened 3 days earlier. So it's important to have the date and time, a news release number if you're doing more than one, and if you're doing more than one page, put more at the bottom, and then at the end put end or 3 pounds or 30 at the bottom. That signifies that you're done. And I've never known where 30 comes from, but that's universal in the media, and anyone who writes for the news. I don't know where 30 comes from. If anyone wants to email that information in, I'd be happy to get that. All writing can be improved by paying attention to just basic organization, like I said, grammar and spelling. It's really important. You don't have to sound like a PhD, but just don't sound like a fifth grader when you're writing something, because it does that. Really, your credibility really takes a hit when something is written so simplistically and so poorly that it just makes you look bad. Things should be written to what's called the Associated Press style, and if you don't have it already, the Associated Press style book and briefing on media law is the Bible for news writers, and it's $12 on Amazon. At least it was when I bought it 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever it was. But that's it helps you avoid a lot of the pitfalls and grammar and spelling errors that can pop up. There are some websites. I always say I've never used these websites. They came with the presentation, so I don't necessarily vouch for them, but they're out there. You have? Okay.
No, I was just saying pause for a second because there's an ad going on. Okay.
And we're back. Again, web products are becoming critical, and I always encourage emergency responders to at least start a Facebook page, because as most of us probably know, it's really easy to do. We have the agency website as well. We have a Twitter account. Flickr is a photo sharing website, and anyone who's I'm 42, and anyone who's watching this who's younger than me probably knows a lot more about these than I do. But we also have a YouTube page, and we don't use blogs a lot, but there is potential for that. Just by nature, they can be used to educate. We control the content of our website, obviously. Information can include links to either other organizations or other resources. Ready.gov is something that has preparedness tips for everything: tornadoes and floods, and winter driving, that sort of thing. So we often put that link up there. Right now we have a lot of links to still Irene recovery here a year and a half later, and Sandy recovery. But the negatives, especially during during an active incident is it at least ours is somewhat labor intensive, and so it can be difficult to update on the fly. And actually during Irene we had to abandon it for 24 hours or so until Burlington Police and UVM Police sent someone over to help us out and update the website. We just had so much going on. Like I said, we had calls that were never ending, and we had social media, which we saw as a little more important. We went from 800 people on Facebook, as we're here now. We went from 800 people on Facebook 2 days before Irene to 3,600 a week later, and we just hit 7,500. Was it yesterday or the day before? It was very recently, and we have more followers, more likes on Facebook than I think any other emergency management organization in the East. So it's really been a good experiment, and it's a good tool for us. Now, it's the most popular social media site on earth. They got to 1 billion people about a month or so ago. You can do status updates, which can be evacuate this area or prepare by, get stuff off your lawn because high winds are coming. We post a lot of links to other organizations or information resources, like you asked about earlier. Usually it's, we have a lot of partner organizations at the Department of Health. They have a Facebook page. We point people to them. We point people to the Agency of Transportation. And that's one less thing that we have to do. We just go on and share it on our wall. And one that we do probably more often than others is the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service in Burlington has a great Facebook site, and they will do graphics and just explain what's coming up over the next 24 hours or the next week or something like that. Don't get too close on the camera. No. And it also allows the public to post information. We don't open it up for people to post directly. People will post in the comment section under something we've done, and it hasn't really been a problem. Once in a blue moon, someone will say something negative, but overall, for a site with 7,500 people watching us, it's been pretty positive. And once in a while, in fact, during Irene, I always cite the example of a woman posted on our site, "My parents live in Pittsfield," which was completely cut off and an island unto itself. My elderly parents live in Pittsfield. I haven't heard from them since the storm. And we were able to take that information, get it to the state police. They did a welfare check, and we were able to get back to her within a couple hours and say, "Your parents are fine. They have all the medications they need. They're good." And that's happened a few times in the last since we started using Facebook. Our updates can be reposted, and it's amazing to see some of our posts, how many people repost them, and sometimes it's completely unexpected how many people will repost something. It's easy to update, and it's interactive. Like I said, the public can post insights and observations, and the negative is it's interactive. People can post insights and observations. So we have one person who monitors Facebook and Twitter full-time during an incident, and I was saying earlier that it's kind of become a larger percentage of my day-to-day duties to monitor it, and I try to post at least one thing per day, just to keep it fresh and keep it going, while at the same time not posting too much, because then people just kind of ignore it, block it, and then when you need them to have it, they're not seeing it. Okay, I had forgotten I added this slide. Most of the time we're doing emergency information during an event, whether it's and that's not just during floods or something catastrophic. If I get weather alerts from the National Weather Service saying this light snow is going to make the road slippery on the commute, and we'll post that, and that will let people know that they need to slow down during the commute. And any standard safety messages. There are a lot of there are a lot of winter weather awareness week and flood awareness week and that sort of thing, and so we'll post information on that. And we've also done a lot more photos of events and trainings and things like that in the past, just to kind of show what we're doing, and enhance. Again, that's enhancing your credibility and showing that you're out there working and what you're doing, and it hopefully it enhances the trust that people have in us. Twitter is also very popular. The updates are a little shorter. Again, we reach people directly. We have about 2,000 people following us on Twitter, and I admit fully that I don't use it nearly as much as I should. I certainly don't use it nearly as much as I do Facebook. For whatever that's worth. And the short format doesn't allow for a whole lot of detail, but you can point them in other directions where they can get the detail. Like I said, Flickr is important for us. I know a colleague in Colorado once told me that using Flickr enables the public to post pictures, and they were having wildfires one year, and someone posted a picture from a certain area of the state that they didn't know that they were having a serious problem with the wildfires, and they were able to shuffle resources around and get them to that area and call local responders and say, what do you need? YouTube, we will use that for training purposes for the most part, just to get informational videos up there. But the bottom line in all written communication is getting the information out there. If something is about to happen, if a dam is about to breach or something like that, I don't worry about getting a letterhead or how I write it. I've grabbed my cell phone and emailed something to the media just like that because something was about to happen, and all kinds of typos and things like that. But it's the information that you want people to have, and it's good to look good, but sometimes you don't have time to be as thorough. The Joint Information System, and I'll just kind of touch on this a little bit. It's a network of PIOs who basically work together. In your business, I'm sure you do that, and it's always important, especially when you're in an association or everyone's working on the same emergency incident, that you have the same information going out there so that there isn't conflicting information going out, and people know what they need to do specifically, and not have different recommendations from different people. Usually we have 3 people in our emergency operations center working on it, but we do work by phone, and if something's not major, we'll just touch base by phone or email so that we're all on the same page. It follows the incident command system, so if something major is happening, I'm in charge of the Joint Information Center and the Joint Information System. And like I said, you're sharing resources, you're just bouncing information off each other, and it's just always good to have someone else doing the same thing you are, so that if you're forgetting something, they're remembering it and nothing slips through the cracks. Joint Information Center, I could see in a circumstance where you might want to do this. If there's something you may all want to work together, that's a physical location where you all sit down together and manage the public information and manage the incident and what's going out there. And it also allows the media to have one phone number that they can call to talk to anyone that they need to talk to. And we have a lead PIO, a deputy PIO who actually does all the work. The lead PIO manages the general direction, as like any executive does, and attends leadership briefings. The deputy PIO makes sure all the press releases are done and consistent. And like I said, we have a social media writer. We may have someone writing press releases only, someone answering phones. This all depends on how big the incident is, and we pull people in that we may need. You need to identify your location now, have the proper players in place, make sure you have computers and things like that, because there's not always time to track that stuff down in the middle of an incident. Something that's easily accessible. We're talking fire stations and the like in our line of work, but yours would probably be something like this, and you probably already have them organized and identified. Working with the news media. Now, this is probably everyone can. This is usually the meat and potatoes, what most people are interested in, obviously. And like I said, I was a member of the media, so I know of which I speak here. Before Irene, I used to tell people in these trainings, you will never hear from the international media. I will never hear from the international media. But I did interviews on the BBC. I did an interview on Al Jazeera. I did an phone interview on Colombian National Television, which, by the way, they called my house first, which was a little scary. But they called my house, and then they caught me up just as I was in my just as I was tired and in my most foul mood, and I ripped into them. But I still did the interview. I still gave them the information. I tore into them, not ripped into them. But more often than not, more likely you may see some national attention. Again, all the cable networks and networks were in state, but you'll always see the local media. If there's a media event, it will be the local media every time. They're your key partner in your public information, public relations efforts, and so always take care of them first, because not only are they your key partner and you'll see them again, but their local news can go national in a second, whether it be by social media or their website, or maybe it'll be fed to the national network. They're not the only link to the public, but they do have the widest reach. A lot of people, as much as Facebook has a lot of users, but a greater percentage of the public watches TV and watches the news or reads a newspaper or gets their news online from a source like the Free Press or their local newspaper. But they're convenient, and they have the widest reach. They're convenient for people to get the information from them. The life cycle of a news story, especially in a disaster, initial is when it's happening. Continuing is if it continues to happen. Usually it's a fire and it's over. Diminishing is something. It's a major event, but it's starting to get a little old, and so you'll get phone calls about just random things out of the blue that you didn't see coming. Like after the bridge down in Port Kent was destroyed, I got a call from someone saying, "Is it safe to cross by snowmobile?" They were doing a story on people commuting by snowmobile across the lake because the ferry wasn't up yet and the bridge wasn't there anymore. We use oftentimes in emergency management recognition. Stories are an opportunity. The 1-year anniversary of Irene, we did a lot on flood preparedness and the like. And with police use the anniversary of a missing person to drum up some interest and get that person's picture out there again. Type of news media, obviously, we've seen all of these. Internet is, radio is, not so much anymore. I think there's only Vermont Public Radio has a news department. There are only two other radio stations that have a specified news person, and so it's not what it used to be. Print. A lot of newspapers are losing circulation. They're getting smaller, but a lot of people still watch television, and the internet is really growing fast. When you're dealing with the print media, what's different in what they may need, they need a lot more details, and you'll get a lot more questions from them because they can't rely on video to show what's going on or what's happened. They need to they need to paint a picture with words, and so they need a lot more background information. They also, their stories are also longer, and so they need to fill the space for one thing, and for another thing, they need to paint that picture. But they also oftentimes will need a photo op. They want to get a picture. Sometimes it's not convenient for them to get a picture. Something may be going on, especially at a fire scene or a hazmat scene, and you can't get them a picture, but at least try to get them what you can. Get them as close as you can. Get them some sort of emergency vehicle coming or going. They can use more detail, but sometimes the stories don't happen until the next day. That's often not a big deal, especially if we're doing something ahead of an event, or if you're doing something that's not in the now. It can wait. Television, they will need visuals, even if you're doing a story. If you're doing a story on a fundraiser, if you're trying to pitch a story on a fundraiser or something like that, don't load up everything before they get there. Make sure you're boxing up canned goods or taking in donations while they're there, because they're going to want that picture. I showed up at a fundraiser once where they were loading all this food into trucks, and we got there and the food was already in the trucks. And I said, this isn't going to make for it's funny because it's the same story, but they won't. There's less of a likelihood of them doing the story because there are no pictures, and that was frustrating to me as a reporter, and it's frustrating to me now because it may be a good story, but they may not be able to get video, and in fairness, they have to show something on television, and so they need visuals. So whenever you can think about what that visual can be, without it being staged and contrived, because they'll see right through that. Just make sure you have something going on. Again, concise answers, 15 to 20 seconds, especially with your main points. And if you do have an event going on, or if there's a fire here, God forbid, the fire department is in charge, but oftentimes you'll have a staging area for the media if they can't get close to an event, and at least that staging area should be where there's some action going on again, where trucks are coming and going, or something's being planned. Some of the advantages, they can go on air immediately. They can Skype live. They have live trucks. They can get information on the air immediately, but it's a little less detailed, and so some of the information you may want to get out there could be lost. Radio is pretty much a lot like television without the pictures. They need concise answers as well, and it can be immediate. They can get on the air even quicker because they just need a phone, and they don't need to depend on they don't rely on the pictures, so they can get on the air a little quicker. They don't have to wait for video to get back to them. But again, there are a few field reporters, so if you are expecting, you're doing your emergency planning now, it's good to identify a contact at a local radio station and a TV station, but a little more so with the radio stations. Just get a contact after hours, because there's not always someone there after hours. There's not always someone at the radio station. It's automated, and so get an after hours contact in case you do need to get on the air quickly. They can often arrange that, sometimes over the phone, to get the information out. Like if we have the emergency alert system, so we don't have to do that as much. The emergency alert system is that tone that you hear on your TV or radio that says if there is an actual disaster, you would be this would be followed by instructions on what you need to do. But having contacts at radio stations, even though their role in news is a little more limited now, is good to have. The internet needs the same access and information as certainly print reporters. It's essentially the same thing. They're writing their stories, so they need to paint a picture. They can put video up there, and in fact, a lot of print people are doing video now and putting it up on their website. And again, it can go up quickly, but the person or organization may only update it at certain times of the day. News these days comes from anywhere and everywhere. If something's going on, even if it's a fender bender, depending on the news day, if someone catches it on their smartphone and sends it into a TV station, you could, I tell emergency responders, you could be watching the news that night and see an accident of yours that you were there, and you never knew that the media was there. You never knew that it was a news story because someone caught it on their either a video or a photo on their phone, and so that's another thing that I have to do a lot of is media monitoring, just in case something gets out there. I have to see what's going on out there because we don't always know about it these days, and so we need to look at what's going on. All news media will certainly appreciate, and some will expect prompt answers to their queries. And so you need to be available at all times as best you can. In emergency response, they'll want access to any emergency scene. They'll want your policymakers, certainly the upper echelon of management. At a scene, they'll want to talk to some responders to see how things are going, what they did when the call went out, how many alarms went out, and sometimes they'll want to talk to victims or survivors. Certainly, people, you'll see on the news that if someone's house burns, they sometimes interview the people who are watching their house burn, and I don't always understand how they're readily willing to talk to the news media as their house is burning, but I know I certainly wouldn't, but some people do, and if you can provide that access, it'll be appreciated. Give fair treatment to everyone, focusing, of course, on the locals. You may, Matt Lauer may come here to do a story on something, and I often tell people, if you fawn over Matt Lauer or Katie Couric and ignore the local media, Matt and Katie are going back to New York. The local media will remember that you pushed them aside for this big name or this national media outlet, and it won't be soon forgotten. And so if you're going to err on the side of any kind of favoritism, always err on the side of the local media. At least in our organization, you get a wider reach through the national media. So you just need to determine that for yourselves what works best for you, but the local media will be here after the fact, and so it's always good to take care of them first. And in fact, during Irene, like I said, the phone was ringing nonstop. I had one person taking the messages, I was returning the calls. I would go down the list and I would do them in order, but I would do the locals first, and then go back to the top of the list and do the nationals and internationals who called in order. So always take care of the local media.
Quick question, Mark.
Yes.
I haven't had to respond to queries from media related to natural disaster.
Right.
I don't recall doing that anyway. But just on other issues and whatnot, what do you do with that reporter that you're talking to on the phone that says, my deadline, I need to talk to you right now, my deadline is in 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And you've got your carefully crafted message and talking points and so on and so forth in the path that you're going down. But that reporter wants to drive you someplace you don't want to go. How have you dealt with that?
I have a couple slides on that. You just have to keep bringing up your points. If there's something that you just don't know, say you don't know that, but you will, if you're able to get them the information, say I'll try to get that information for you, or you can direct them to another person. But to stay on your message, you just make that the most compelling and interesting part of the interview and the most obvious part of the interview, and that more often than not, that's how, and I say that as in, that's your 15-second
Elevator speech.
Yeah, good way of putting it. But sometimes it just does. You just can't control it. I find more and more, and maybe I did this too when I was working in the media. I find more and more that the story is already written when the reporter calls you to set up an interview. They know what they want to do, and I'm not saying they ignore the facts. They just know what direction they want to go in. And so sometimes there's no controlling that. But the best you can do is prepare and have your main points ready to fire off, and make that the most compelling part of the story and the most efficient. And you can't always control it, but that's the best you can do. And in regard to deadlines, if you can't meet someone's deadlines, just tell them that. It's better to have them know that you're not going to get them everything by their deadline than have them sitting there wondering, oh my God, do I have to call someone else, and then get desperate and call someone random just to get a story together. But get them what you can. It doesn't. If you're waiting to get all the information to get to them, it's always better to get them part of it before their deadline than all of it after. So let them know what's going on, when you're going to get back to them, if you can get back to them, and give them what you can. And if something's wrong, you just need to call them and say, I was wrong. I gave you some bad information. Or, if it's something that they did wrong, if it's minutia, if it isn't a big deal in the long run, don't be the person who calls every time and says, points out a small error and asks for them to correct it. If it's a big error, save it up for the big errors when you really need them to correct the information. But don't call them every time that there's some small error in the story, if they get your acronym wrong or something like that. If they're doing it consistently, next time you see them, say, by the way, I noticed you haven't been doing NEFCU, you've been doing NUCF, whatever. But clue them in if you can, but don't become a pest about it. And I'm not suggesting NEFCU would be a pest about it. Is that the right acronym? Okay, great. The news media in your area, it's pretty easy to identify the news media in Vermont. You all live here. You know the 4 TV stations now that do newscasts. There are 3 that actually have news departments. The local newspapers, but there are also state and local press associations, the Vermont Association of Broadcasters and the Vermont Press Association will have the resources to identify their members, and you can get that information from them. Search the internet or the phone book. If you're looking for radio stations, just go to W. They're the first ones listed because they're all by call letter. And if you're west of the Mississippi, go to the K's, and that's where they all are. When media shows up at a scene, they can now tell the story from where it's happening, especially here. Fox 44 is right next door. They can almost run a cable from their studio down here if there's something going on, but they all have their microwave trucks and satellite trucks. And like I said, they can even use Skype if it's big enough. You can't control if they show up, but you can, and you have to control the scene, or else it just gets out of control. And if it's an emergency scene, that can be detrimental to the response. When you arrive, if you're not here already, have some information ready to give to the media when you get there. You want to identify yourself as being the media contact, and tell them that, give them what little bit of information you have, and then say, I'm going to go get more, I'll be back, and that will keep them in one area, because they know they're going to get information if they're here. Assess the situation, whatever the situation is. If it's a bank robbery, for instance, it doesn't have to be a flood or anything like that, or a fire or hazmat. Consider your resources, both internally and what other resources you have at the scene, the FBI or local police. Establish contact with other involved agencies, PIOs. If you are the the public information person for, and I'll use a bank robbery as an example. You're going to want to figure out from police who's doing the talking, and it will be the police and the FBI. Actually, it'll be the FBI, which means not much information will get out. But I understand how that works. It's probably best that not too much information get out, but at least make contact with them and say, I'll be your contact at the bank, and we'll work together. And keep leadership apprised of what's going on, whether it's coming inside and saying, hey, we have 50 cameras outside and they all want a statement from us. Here's what I suggest we do. Would you like to do it? That sort of thing. If need be, this is often handy at a fire scene or some scene where you don't want people crawling all over the place. Establish a media staging and briefing area that doesn't hinder operations, but offers the media reasonable, legitimate access. Basically, you don't want them to get in the way of emergency responders, because the emergency responders, especially firefighters, need to be able to do what they need to do without a reporter standing between them and the building. But you also, if you do need to get the media as close as you can to a scene. Again, you don't have to. You can keep them off private property. You can push them as far away as possible, but they're going to get their story somewhere, and if you're cooperative, they'll be more likely to listen to you. I'm not saying kowtow to the media whenever they want something and give them exactly what they want. You just have to balance your needs against their needs, and meeting their needs will help you in the long run to be a good source of information and someone who they will go to, as opposed to being the enemy. If you can put them in an area, if they can't see the scene, at least put them somewhere where they can see trucks coming and going, or police coming and going. And if, especially during a fire or something like that, we'll often do what's called a media pool. We can't have people walking around a scene because they will get in the way, but we can have one person escort a TV camera and a still camera to the scene to get their pictures, and they share that with everybody there. It's not for us to police. It's not for you to police. You go out, you say, okay, we're going to do a media pool. We'll take in one print reporter, one TV reporter, one TV camera, one still camera. Work it out. You guys figure out who is going in, and I'll escort you in 5 minutes.
So do they typically cooperate when you have
Yes.
4 TV stations
Yep.
there?
They've been doing it for a long time. It's not for you to police. If they call later, say, I offered you guys, you guys need to work it out. I can't tell someone to share video. It's something that we offered, but it almost never happens. It happened, I think, once when I worked at Channel 3. We were doing a court hearing, and you always have to pool video in court in Chittenden County because only one camera is allowed to roll. And we got there first. We said it's always advantageous to get there first because you don't have to deal with going to someone else's studio and making a copy. But we got there first, and we set up, and one of our competitors sent an intern without a camera, just someone with a notebook just to be there. And then afterwards they said, when can we get our video? And our videographer says, where's your video camera? You wouldn't have got this if we weren't here. And so there was some dispute there as to whether they were entitled to it, and I can't remember how it was resolved, or it was so long ago, and I wasn't really involved in this case. But it's not usually a problem. They will share because they all need it and they all know the circumstances. So it doesn't often create many problems, but at the same time, don't do a media pool every time, and because they'll start to realize that you're not doing it to keep them safe. You're doing it for your own convenience. So if you can release them on a scene, then release them on a scene, or release them on your building. Oftentimes you'll have secure areas of your building. IBM does, they shoot their own video, but I've been in situations where there's a secure building and they'll just take one camera crew through and you have to share it.
How do you restrain all those people? You have 4 or 5 media people, one's sneaking around the corner over here. I mean, how do you?
You just have to do the best you can. You have to.
One person tried to corral all those people.
You have to let them know where the staging area is, and a good way of keeping them in, and that's this last bullet here at the bottom. If they know this is where they're getting the information, they're going to stick to it. And oftentimes, whatever you think about the media, they're still human beings. They still understand that they can't do certain things, and some will. I went to a scene of a guy with a gun in a house once. He was in a house with a gun. Police said you can't go down this street because guy's a gun, and if you're there, it's an extra target, and he will shoot at the camera. And the photographer I was working with said, "Well, it's my safety. I should decide whether I go." I was about to get out of the car and said, "Have fun, Andy," and say, "Have fun, Andy." But the police explained, and correctly, that if you get in trouble, we have to risk our lives to save you. So I mean, not that you're going to have to control a scene with an active shooter, but that's one instance in which they and we understood that, we need to stay to a certain place, and if there's a promise of information coming to that spot, we're not going to roam around a lot. We're not going to run the risk of okay, here come, the chief was here 5 minutes ago giving us all the information, and now he or she is not coming back, because they said, we will give you information here, and then I have to get back to the fire. They're not going to come out a second time, or you're not going to come out a second time. And so if you promise this is where the information is going to be, the background information, it will hold them to the spot in many cases. But again, you can't. I mean, especially when something's happening on public property, you can't always control it. You can. I guess I don't know what the legal circumstances are where you can arrest somebody if they barge in on a scene, but I know Marcellus Parsons years ago was at the scene of a fire or something, and I can be here, I can be anywhere I want, and the fire department turned a fire hose on him. And that wasn't the right thing to do for the fire department. I'll say that right up front.
They said you're all wet, Marcia.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they were. It was what it was, and Marcellus, he could go where he wanted. It was public property, he felt, and who's to say he was wrong? He felt that he wasn't in the way, and who's to say the firefighters didn't, just take pleasure in turning a fire hose on him? But I mean, most of the time, people will understand that there's a danger here, and you have a job to do. It's getting tougher because there are so many young reporters coming in now. There's been a lot of turnover. When I was in the news, I was with Channel 3 for 10 years, and I was still like 5th on the seniority scale at Channel 3, and now I think a couple of years ago, someone who had been there 2 years was at the top of the seniority scale, and so there's a lot more turnaround now, and so that's why you're educating people a lot more now when they do come to a scene, or when you are working with them. No matter what the issue is, you're doing a lot more education, and you want to, when you're chatting people up, say, okay, this is what happens, this is how the credit union works, that sort of thing, just to get that ingrained and help them understand why you're doing what you're doing. Sometimes you will do a news briefing. Until I started teaching this, I didn't really care about the differentiation between a news conference and a news briefing and what they meant, but I guess a news conference is something the governor does where he takes questions about a number of topics. A news briefing is when you're talking about one topic. Usually it's the scene of an incident. And we'll have those, we don't do those every time, but we will do them when, there are so many people seeking information that you just don't have time to do all the one-on-one interviews. But also, it's important that you get everyone the same information. And sometimes you'll do an interview with this person, they'll leave, someone else will come, and then you'll remember something in the second interview that you give to the second interview, and then the first person sees the second person's story, and why didn't you give me that information? And it's just, well, I forgot until, or something will happen in the interim, and so it's just it's a good way to be fair. It's a good way to save your own time, and so news briefings can be beneficial to everybody. Preparing for an interview, of course, you want to identify the best spokesperson. Sometimes that's you, sometimes that's leadership. Develop your objectives and what you want to say and what your messages are. Consider your audience, who you're speaking to, because you're not just talking to cameras, you're talking to the public. Develop your message and materials. Oftentimes that is talking points, so that you're on message the whole time. Get clearance and approval. Sometimes, probably more often for you than me, that's running it by a lawyer, or again, your president or leadership. And either practice or prep the spokesperson. You can kind of think of what questions are coming, and so you can practice your answers ahead of time, because you know what's coming, and it's good to practice those answers, especially when you can think of a question that you don't want to hear, and you can, instead of being deer in the headlights, you can prepare for that question, and you can have at least a pretty good answer to that, or at least a way of redirecting if you can legitimately. Don't ever speculate or offer opinion or answer hypothetical questions. That's just you just need to stay away from that. And you can come out and say, I don't want to speculate, or that's an opinion question, and that has nothing to do with the facts. Don't respond or talk for or about other agencies or other companies. You may be trying to be helpful. A fire department may know the answer to something that's more appropriate for a police department, but you still don't do it. You let them answer their own questions. Don't comment on what others have said, especially if you haven't heard what someone else has said. Such and such said your bank did such and such. And if you don't know that this person said that, you may be responding to something completely fictional. And so don't ever respond or comment on what other people have said. And you can redirect that as, well, I don't know about that, but I do know that our bank, blah, 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 and then you laud your credentials and all the positives that you can comment on. Don't ever lose your temper in an interview, because the story ceases to be what you want the story to be about, and it becomes about you and how you lost your temper. This again, another quick anecdote from Channel 3. The old Speaker of the House, Ralph Wright, was being interviewed by Tim Lewis, another seasoned reporter, when I was there, and Tim had something on travel vouchers that Ralph didn't know was coming. He thought he was talking about something else, and
Ralph was a very low-key legislator.
Yeah. He was very humble and quiet, but Tim came up with, we have these travel vouchers that your wife was involved with. State paid for your wife to take a trip with you. How would you like to respond to that? And Ralph waited for a second, and his response was, "What is this shit, Lewis?" Guess what got on the air? And Ralph Wright, as an aside, in his book, he explained how he was sitting next to his 90-year-old mother when that came on the air. He said, "Ralph Wright, what did you say?" And so at the very least, your mother may scold you, but anything can come up, and if you think you're being asked unfair questions, you just have to try to answer them as best you can and stay as positive as you can, and don't get angry on camera or during an interview, because that response is gold. I mean, they would love to see you freak out, and myself included. I'm not saying that anyone is. That's just more compelling, even though it's, it affects fewer people. But, I mean, we saw on the news a little while ago, the governor walked out after he was getting some questions on his properties, or he lost his temper or something. And, the subject of the day wasn't the focus of the news stories. It was the fact that he walked out of a press conference or whatever he did. I may not be remembering that correctly.
Well, it's the Matt Dillon speeding ticket category. It's not newsworthy, but it's sensational.
Well,
You
it's
get
it's out of the ordinary.
Right.
So, and it's compelling. I mean, I would more likely watch that than watch him talk about taxes or something like that. And at the end of the day, newspapers are trying to sell. I'm not saying it affects their news coverage or anyone around. I'm not saying anyone around here is sensational. I'm not making that assertion. But at the end of the day, they have to sell newspapers. They have to sell ad time on the air. That's if they want to stay in business, they still have to make money, and so they still have to put compelling things on the air. And I'm not saying at all that they're sensational, but they're looking for what people will watch or people will read. So the short answer is don't lose your temper. If you ever lie, you're done. No one will ever talk to you again. So don't lie. There are other ways of answering questions that you don't want to answer. Don't say anything you don't want to read in print, hear on the radio, or see on TV or the internet, because you're never really off the record. Even if you're with someone you've known for years and you trust, you may say something that is meant to be off the record, and they may not understand that. I had a friend who was at a barbecue at my house once, and he worked for a political candidate, and we were chatting, and he's like, "Oh, my candidate just got a new campaign manager." Next day, I'm working. I don't have a story. I'm call the candidate, and I'm like, "Heard you have a new campaign manager." It wasn't meant to be. I did not know that it wasn't common knowledge. It was just a friend of mine, and I shouldn't be reporting on it because my friend's just telling me about this. But that's an example of. I talk to my friends now. I make sure I tell them this is not for broadcast. So even if you know someone really well, you're never really off the record, and so anything you say can show up on the news. And of course, even if you're talking in a crowd, the person behind you in line could be a reporter, a print reporter or something like that, and they overhear you and they know what you're talking about. It may not be printed, but you may get a phone call the next day saying, "Hey, what was this person talking about when they said such and such?"
Well, everybody's a reporter today with a smartphone.
Yep, exactly.
You can say anything and you'll be on the internet within seconds.
Yep, or on someone's Facebook page. And your Facebook page for your organization can be quoted as, Vermont Emergency Management and Homeland Security said. The first time that happened, I wrote something on our Facebook page, and it was quoted as us saying that. I called the reporter, and I was like, "I'm not sure how this works." And he's like, "Well, I'm not sure if I did anything wrong either." And we discussed it, and we're saying it to the public. Anyone can read it and say it, so we're saying it. So anything that's on your Facebook page or your website is quotable as coming from your organization. So be careful. It gets a little gray when, I have some media friends who are on my personal Facebook page, and it hasn't become an issue yet. Although I did write on Facebook once that AT&T is out in this area, and a friend of mine who's works for the media called me as the public information officer for Vermont Emergency Management and said, "What can you tell me about this?" And so at least he didn't just go ahead and print it. So be careful. Improving your responses, like I said, be prepared, know what you want to say, stick to your main point, always be positive yet realistic. That's mainly when you have a missing person or something like that. You don't want to create false hope. Show compassion and empathy. That's not difficult because we all live in the community that we're dealing with, and it's oftentimes our neighbors who are going through this. Know when to stop. Sometimes you'll get to the end of your answer, and the reporter with the microphone will keep the microphone on you and just look at you like, okay, keep going. Don't keep going. You may say something that you didn't want to say. So stop when you're done. and any dead air or silence is their problem. And then at the end of an interview, always summarize, bringing back your main points. And 9 times out of 10, a reporter will say, do you have anything to add or anything that we missed? And if they haven't asked the question about what you want to talk about, that's your opportunity to bring up what you want to talk about. Never say no comment. It's become more and more obvious these days. If you see someone saying no comment on anywhere, it makes them look guilty or that they don't know what they're talking about. Some alternatives, I won't go through all these verbatim, but make sure these are truthful. Don't just come up with an alternative to no comment because you don't want to talk about something. Pushing them off on someone else is always a good one, because it may not be appropriate for you to talk about it. But again, make sure it's truthful and not just a convenient way to not answer a question. Sometimes they're not asking you the right questions to get to your main point, and so you can use any of these phrases to say what's most important is, and when they hear what's most important is, their ears perk up, and then that's your chance to get your message on the air or in print. What the public should know is another good one. So these are some of the phrases that you can use to get back on your point. There are a number of common questions, and you can think of most of them before an interview. Think as a reporter, think as an outsider, and what people might want to know about a situation or your organization. And again, be ready for the questions you don't want to hear, and have some answers ready for that so that you're not caught flat-footed. This is especially important for TV interviews. Pay attention to eye contact. Always ask the reporter where you should be looking during an on-camera interview. Usually it's off to the side, not into the camera, but sometimes when you're doing a live interview where there's no reporter, there's just a camera, you're looking straight into the camera. So always ask beforehand where you should be looking. Make sure your voice is interesting and not just monotone. The expression on your face can betray a lot of information. If you roll your eyes, or if you have a surprised look on your face, that can say a lot more than your words ever could. Your body position, a TV reporter will often tell you where your shoulders should be and that sort of thing. Again, don't use gestures, don't move a lot, especially if you see a lot of reporters more and more who have the camera, and they're also the ones asking the questions. And I actually did this for a couple of years, and nothing was more maddening than getting back to the studio. You didn't realize the person shifted this way a little bit, and the camera shot is like that, or half the face is cut off, and you just have to figure out a way to work with it. So that's helpful to them if you don't move a lot, and whatever you determine to be the proper attire, something that's non-distracting. If it's funny hat day and you're doing a serious interview, don't wear the funny hat, because people will be wondering why you're wearing a funny hat or a wild tie or something like that. If you're nervous, it's the best way to deal with it is to be prepared. Again, anticipate questions and have those answers ready. Do jumping jacks, take a walk, whatever you need to do, whatever you normally do to relax. Use your nervousness as positive energy. And just especially when you don't do this a lot, when you don't do a lot of interviews, the reporter wants you to succeed. The reporter doesn't want a lot of ums and ahs or someone quaking in their boots. They want the best information. They want the best sound bites. And you can even ask the reporter before, again, especially if you're not a seasoned person. If you don't do it very often, you can ask them, if I don't like the way I'm answering something, can I start again? more often than not, they'll say, absolutely, I want the best answer. So that's always talk to the reporter beforehand and kind of figure out the parameters and what they'll allow you to do. And it's always okay to, after you hear a question, you don't need to snap off the answer right away. You can take a few seconds to try to consider your answer and gather your thoughts. Bottom line, keep the lines of communication open with the media. Don't dodge their phone calls. If you can't talk about something, tell them why you can't talk about something, or give them to a more appropriate person for them to speak with. I get that a lot, not only because I'm emergency management and homeland security, but people just know me now and they know that I know where they should go, and so I get a lot of those phone calls, which is good for me because I'm seen as a good source of information. And if you ever need anything, any operational advice, if you ever have an event where you could use some assistance, get a press release template or anything like that, give me a call. We're in the book, and I have cards here, but that does the people out there no good. You can get contact information.
Yeah, we can get that information.
Get contact information to everybody. Keep it handy, and if you ever need anything, give me a call, shoot me an email. You all pay taxes too, so I won't be operating outside of our lane. We're here to help the taxpayers, and what you do certainly helps a lot of people.
Mark, we have a question from a viewer, not specific to credit unions, but how far does Vermont Emergency Management, after the emergency has subsided, I guess how far do you go after the emergency has subsided? Does it continue to release related good stories about recovery, etc., or end when the disaster ends?
It's on a case-by-case basis, but I guess the short answer is yes, if there's positive. Usually the gauge is if there's information that the public needs to know to assist in their recovery. If there's something important, we will get it out there. If there's a deadline for public assistance from FEMA, we'll certainly do a release and all the outreach to let people know that the deadline is looming, or this is what you need to do to get assistance. We have a lot of towns dealing with getting reimbursement from FEMA. We have a lot of stuff on our website that's okay. Here are the basics of what you need to do. Here's a checklist. Certainly, if something is interesting and noteworthy, we'll put releases out, and absolutely all the time. If there's something that the public needs to know, we'll put out that information as well. But that's our focus. The public and what's beneficial to them is what drives it, and so that's generally the rule of thumb. Any other questions? I think. Thank you very much. Thank you all for watching and listening in. If you're still awake, but thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mark. And thank you all for joining us on the broadcast. We'll be able to follow up with providing Mark's PowerPoint to you and Mark's contact information should you want it. And we've also been recording this, so if you'd like others in your organization to view this presentation or any part of it, we will provide that information upon request once we have the recording all set. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good day.